Welcome to our week of action. This is day 5. We're here to celebrate our climate entrepreneurs, innovators out there who want to move towards a more climate positive and resilient world. That's what we're here for, and that's why we are EIT Climate-KIC as well. We want to generate knowledge and innovations through our community of partners in Europe and more across the world to really move this world to a climate positive place. I think we all agree on that, and I think this is an important message as well for the United Nations Climate Change Conference over the next 2 weeks, which will kick off this Sunday, called COP26 in Glasgow, right? I'm Christian. I'm leading the ClimAccelerator efforts, where we graduate startups every single year in very different places and try to help them scale their innovations. Audience, please remember, today is our day of food. So if you're working on any innovation or idea, feel free to make it visible and post it through our hashtag, Destination1.5. Our hashtag again is Destination1.5, which you may see on the screen right now. Feel free to share it and feel free to celebrate with us all these food innovators out there who are working hard every single day to improve our planet and our world. And audience, please remember to raise questions. Stay curious and ask my interviewees anything you want to know about them. Their journey, their business, or their future plans, or how their life as an entrepreneur in climate is. That's our topic of today. And I do believe that we have 2 entrepreneurs with us here right now. Let's have a look. Hi Anastasia, hi Philip, how are you doing?
Hi, great.
Good to have you here, and thanks for the time. I would like to ask you to introduce yourselves first. We'll go ladies first, Anastasia, many times, and then we'll take over with you, Philip, right? Anastasia, introduce yourself.
Yeah, super nice to be here. Thank you so much. My name is Anastasia. I'm from Switzerland, and I'm here today because together with a friend, I co-founded a company called KITRO, which focuses on food waste management in the hospitality industry.
All right, so my name is Philip. Thanks for having me. I'm based in Vienna, and I'm one of the founders at Rebel Meat. Our mission at Rebel Meat is to help people in the most delicious way eat less but better meat. So that's to say we need to basically get down from the 1.2 kilogram of meat consumption that we have at the moment down to 300 grams. That's what's considered sustainable and healthy. And we do that with blended meat products, and we were also part of the Climate-KIC Accelerator.
Thanks both for having you, and I will ask a few questions. First about your business and why you're doing all this. Then we will talk about your industry, alternatives and competitors out there. And then a third point will be very much focused on you as an entrepreneur. Why are you doing this every day? What plans do you have? And I mean, what are you feeling throughout this whole journey, right? At the end, audience, we will open up for your questions, so feel free again to ask many questions throughout the session. Anastasia, so why did you start KITRO, and what is this all about? I mean, what was the past and what's the future of KITRO?
Yes, so actually it started when I met Naomi, my co-founder, in university. We both studied international hospitality management in Lausanne, in Switzerland. And based on that, we worked a lot in the industry, during internships, during summers, and so on. And so we were actually working in kitchens, in service, so front and back of house, and witnessed this problem of food waste firsthand, I would say, because we were the ones also, unfortunately, throwing away a lot of food in these kitchens. And that inspired us to then really rethink this massive issue. And we realized that at the end of the day, in these kitchens, you obviously have the focus of serving great food to your customers and not to look into your bin the whole day. But that is a bit the problem. The overview was lacking, and chefs didn't really know at the end of the day what filled up their bins. And so that's how we got to this conclusion that actually maybe it would make sense to measure food waste. Best would be automatically, because it's a very stressful environment usually. And so KITRO, that's essentially what KITRO is now. It's a solution for our customers who are mostly bigger hotel chains, restaurant groups, and canteens. And they basically can automatically measure their food waste. It gets analyzed with AI technology that we are developing, or we've developed. So algorithms identify what has been thrown away. And at the end of the day, the customer receives insights into how much was wasted, where did the waste come from, what was the cost of it, And based on that, they can then optimize their work processes and reduce food waste. So this whole idea really came, we saw the problem and decided to do something about it, and found that AI technology would be a great technology to use to solve this issue.
Very good story, and very good benefits you're generating. Philip, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, same here. I met my co-founder Cornelia, and we were both basically discussing a lot of different solutions to the one problem we found was most pressing, mainly the incredible problems that are associated with meat overconsumption. And we looked at different opportunities out there, from cultivated meat to vegan meat replacements. But we kind of found out that there are many solutions out there, and people are not using them. Or in the other case, they will probably take many more years before they are market ready. And we wanted to offer a solution that can basically have an impact right now, because we don't have much time left to really act and bring down meat consumption. And that's why we came up with the concept of blending meat with plant-based ingredients, because it offers a solution today for people who are not ready to eat vegan plant-based meat, and that's actually the majority of population. And they can now basically reduce their meat consumption without doing any compromise, without going for highly processed products or any artificial tastes, artificial ingredients. And basically really go with a very natural, 100% organic product. And yeah, that's how we think we can make a difference here.
That's very good to hear. I mean, I'm a German, and we can see in Germany as well that we eat a lot of meat, and I think there need to be very different alternatives out there. Anastasia, tell us a bit more about the future. I mean, what do you want to achieve in, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, so we started really this journey to help mitigate food waste, because we realized that it is a global problem. It is massive. 1/3 of all food produced ends up being wasted along the global supply chain, and that makes no sense if you consider all the resources that are used, and also that some people in certain parts of the world don't have enough to eat. So on every level, food waste really bugged us a lot, and that's why we got started. And now the goal where we see ourselves in the future is really that we would like to create standards for this industry, because we really see that this gap, this massive data gap, is actually a big problem. Because if you don't know what you're wasting, how can you optimize it? And it goes a bit into the direction of the Sustainable Development Goals. They are great. They want to have food waste by 2030, but then how do you know you've achieved this goal if you haven't measured the status quo, or like where we stand right now? And this is something that the EU is now also recognizing, and they are saying, okay, we need to have legally binding targets for food waste reduction and monitoring in the first place, and actually have comparable data to see if we're on track with this goal. And this is where we see our part to really help them get this data and move towards this goal and help them to achieve it at the end of the day.
And then how many restaurants do you want to be in, let's say, in 5 years? Do you have any idea or any
all of them
plan? Okay, very good to hear.
Obviously not in all of them, but definitely on a represented on a global level. That's the goal.
Okay. And Philip, what's your plan and long-term vision? Let's say, what do you want to achieve in 5 years?
I love the ambition with all restaurants, by the way. No, because actually restaurants are actually a big problem in many reasons, especially also with meat. So we see that a lot of people now that want to reduce meat consumption, they stop buying meat at the supermarket, but when they go out, they eat meat at the restaurant, which is usually a big problem, because when you buy it at the supermarket, you at least know where the meat comes from, but that's often not the case at the restaurant. And usually when you don't know where it comes from, then you can assume it's quite cheap and probably not very sustainable. But that's just on a side note. So to our ambitions, I mean, this is really a completely new segment, right? Has not been a blended meat product on the market before. And we think it can actually make a dent. I mean, right now, all the plant-based meat products together are 1% of the European meat market share. So that's really just a drop in the ocean, and we hope that this new category can become at least as big or maybe much bigger, because that would make a big difference in total meat consumption. And so, yeah, we need to build up that segment. We need to educate consumers that this is an option. And we need to work also on the supply chain, that the meat we use is as sustainable as possible. So right now we use organic meat, but we want to move into the direction of regenerative meat. So that's really meat that's grown in special ways like rotational grazing, where you make sure you focus on biodiversity, you make sure the soil builds up on humus again, so that you actually store CO2 on the ground. So these are all ways we want to go to make sure we can offer the most sustainable meat products out there. And ultimately, if and when cultivated meat hits the market, then we will be ready to integrate such meat into our products and maybe even enable it, because actually what we're building right now is technology on how to blend meat and plant-based ingredients. And that is exactly what is needed for this cultivated meat, because when this comes to market, it won't come in a pure form, because it will be too expensive and it won't have the necessary and consumer grade structure, taste, color, etc. And this is basically what we learn to do right now, and what we then can offer the cultivated meat industry. Yeah. And maybe even use our distribution and brand, because we also think that we are basically building the perfect audience for this kind of product right now, since our customers, they love meat, but they're conscious about the consequences of eating it. And so this is basically I think the perfect audience for at some point being the first movers on cultivated meat.
That's very good to hear. And I mean, Anastasia's customers are usually restaurants, and Philip, your customers are more supermarkets then, or you plan on working more with restaurants as well, and like working with the same audience?
Yeah, so we want to go with both channels, work with restaurants, because we think it's important to use this channel to consume the market. I mean, restaurants is where many consumers try out new things, where potentially staff can explain what this new concept is about, and where you build a brand. Yeah. But then ultimately volume really comes from supermarkets. So for us, it's necessary to use both channels to grow.
Okay. And Anastasia, what's the most typical waste in a restaurant? What do you think it is?
Bread. Yeah.
I would
bread,
guess so, yeah.
potato.
How many kilos or tons have you seen moving, like, or being wasted every year within your restaurants? Is there any number?
Of bread? Oof. I cannot throw a number out right now, I would say, but it's a lot. It's really shocking, actually, the amount. Especially, I guess it depends also where in the world you are. But now Switzerland, Germany, like these regions, we're big bread lovers, and so you definitely see it every day in tons. So it's quite shocking when you look at the data.
Okay, good. Let's ask you a bit more about your industry. How do you see this whole food industry moving, and what are alternatives or competitors out there for you guys? Anastasia first.
Yeah, for us it was interesting, because when we started this, so we started in 2017, and now I'm speaking really about the system gastronomy and hotel industry, right? But there, when we first started talking to customers, you kind of had to explain why measuring and reducing food waste helps them also for better food cost control, and also reducing the food costs, right? And so it was quite a different conversation, because there you really were more in explaining, hey, food waste is really bad for this and this reason, and this is what you can do if you reduce it. And now we've seen, in only these last 4 years, we've seen quite a big shift in how these conversations go with customers, because you don't start at, like now if you start a sales meeting, you don't start explaining why food waste is a problem. They all are very aware of it. and also about the benefits. It's just, why should we measure with you is then the discussion, right? So that was a cool thing we noticed, that this has quite changed in the past few years, this conversation, and that people are more and more aware of the issue and more willing to also do something about it. Yeah, and in terms of measurements, what we see, there is many different organizations now, also the world, so that WWF, for example, they are now launching also benchmarks in that area. They're trying to find like a harmonized way to measure it. And so that is an interesting conversation that's going on right now. And what we see, and that is also kind of in aligned with how we see the measurements going forward, these benchmarks, is that long-term measurements are becoming more and more also of an opportunity, because back in the days, and that goes a bit into your questions about alternatives. So 4 years ago, how you would measure food waste was really manual. You had a paper and a pen and you stood next to it, or you had a scale, or there were some more digital options where you had a tablet solution attached to your scale, and then you typed in what you were throwing away, but it was still quite a time-intensive kind of method, or time-intensive effort at the end of the day. And so from there, this obviously didn't allow customers to measure long-term, because it took too much time and too much effort, and it was more of an audit situation. So you would do an audit for 2 days, for 2 weeks, maybe a month maximum, but that would be stretching it already. And then based on that data, you would define some action points and implement them, and then you would not know if the results are actually what were the results of these action points, because you wouldn't then go and measure. Maybe you measured again the year after. And so this is what with KITRO we really wanted to start, is to make measurement and data collection so easy that actually a long-term measurement of a minimum of 12 months, let's say, is really feasible for our customers, because that's when you see the trends, you see the different seasonalities. You also can identify different action points and then measure the results of it. So it makes it a lot more interesting also for the customer to kind of stay committed to this journey and see where they end up at the end.
Okay, very good to hear. And Philip, I mean, what's your industry like, and who are alternatives or competitors out there?
Yeah, I mean, so basically in the meat industry, there's a lot of focus right now, of course, on plant-based alternatives. But as mentioned, I mean, it's growing like crazy, but it's still very, very small compared to the rest of the meat industry. So we think it's actually quite a missed opportunity to not look more into how to make meat more sustainable, because by focusing only on replacing it, we're missing a lot of potential, because it's not a black and white story, right? There are a lot of ways to really horribly make meat, both in terms of animal welfare and in terms of environmental problems. And there are much better ways as well. And I think we should put a lot more focus also on producing better meat rather than only replacing it, because this won't go fast enough. And consumer behavior doesn't change quick enough for this industry to become sustainable in a meaningful amount of time. So we're not really playing in the ballpark of the vegan meat replacement startups. They're doing, most of them, a great job. Not all of them, unfortunately, especially the bigger companies. They're not using sustainable resources sometimes for the meat replacement products, which kind of gives a bad image for the whole industry. So that should change as well. And in general, we should look more at the supply chain behind it, and not so much have this black and white thinking, but really make sure that the things we use in our products are the most sustainable available.
I couldn't agree more, basically. I mean, let's come to your story as entrepreneurs, and like the million euro question is, why are you doing this every day? What makes you wake up and do this every single day? Philip this time first, and then Anastasia.
I mean, it's so interesting with food, and that probably speaks to both of us. You can basically take a lot of decisions every day that have a very fast impact, right? So compare this to the energy sector or to many other industries where, you know, you build a power station and it's going to be there for 50 years, or you buy a car and you're going to use it for 10 years. But with your food, yeah, you can basically have an impact 3 times a day, very fast. And I think that's what's so powerful about the food industry and about being a founder in the food industry. And at the end of the day, that's the spirit we have in the team, and that's what I really love about my job.
Anastasia.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think at the end of the day, you start because you see this problem, it bugs you so much, and you want to have an impact. And so it's really the impact on one side, that's how we got started, then having, of course, a great co-founder, and then later a great team that is with you on this journey, that makes it really worthwhile to get up every morning. And yeah, that you just, when you see like happy customers, or talk to customers, or get a big partner that is supporting you, then that is these validations that you're on the right track, and that's super nice to get.
Very good motivations both of you have, basically. Philip, tell us about one of your best moments you've had as an entrepreneur, and then Anastasia, tell us about one of your worst moments you've had as an entrepreneur, and then we'll switch.
No, I mean, one of the best moments definitely was when our first product was available in the supermarket. I mean, there is really a lot of work to be done before you can get to that point, both in terms of, you know, convincing people on the investment side, but also, of course, on the retail side, but also really on the actually delivering on it. So in terms of production, logistics, packaging, and so all these things, and it's really nice to see when these things come together. And in actually 2 weeks of today, we're gonna have our third big product launch. So we're adding 2 more products, and we'll have 7 by then. And that's again like a big project of more than 6 months coming to an end. And now we can see everything coming together, and that's really a nice feeling. That's all the work then really pays off.
Very good. Anastasia.
Yeah, I mean, in general, this whole journey is a massive roller coaster. So there is a lot of really great moments, and then some also rather bad moments. You asked me about the worst moment. It's probably hard to pinpoint one. But I think it's, for me personally, when I don't feel the motivation to get up in the morning because of something that has happened. Let's say, I don't know, a plan didn't work out how you planned it to go, and so that's quite a bad moment for me, because then I'm like, but now I'm not motivated anymore. So that's sad. But then usually you do one call with someone from the team, and then it ends up working out anyway. But I couldn't say a specifically worst moment right now, to be very honest with you.
That's all right, and I'm sure we all have these kind of moments as well. Plans never work out all the time. Philip, maybe share us one of the worst ones or saddest ones, and then Anastasia, go for one of your best moments.
I think the worst moments in general for me are when team members leave. So at the 2 times now, I mean, we're working for 2.5 years on this project, and we have quite a couple of people on the team. So I think it's natural that people at some point leave. But of course, that always feels like breaking up, because you work so closely with those people, and you don't really understand why they leave, why they're not with you, and you realize you failed on telling them your vision properly, or they don't believe in the same vision that you have, because otherwise they would never leave, right? Because our vision, of course, is so big, the way we see it. But yeah, that's, I think, of course, very good learning experience as a leader, as a person, and for the whole company.
Anastasia, go ahead with one of your best ones.
One of the best ones would have been closing the first financing round, because that was like this external validation that you got from investors that they believe in you as a team, and also in your product and in your mission and vision. And also hiring, so first hiring your first I don't know, team member, getting your first customer, writing the first invoice. So all these firsts are usually really exciting, good moments.
Very good. And both of you, please tell us a bit more. I mean, did you do all of this by yourself? Did you have any mentors, any experts, or someone helping you on the way? I mean, and who helped you? Just tell us some names or give us some examples. And Anastasia, go first.
Yeah, actually, we did not do this all by ourselves at all. We came out of university and actually were supported by great mentors, and started by doing quite a few acceleration programs. So Climate-KIC was one of them. It was actually the first one we started doing was the greenhouse incubator, for when the idea was quite young. I don't think it exists anymore, but that was super helpful because it helped us to pay for the first prototype that we wanted to build. And in that program, we also met one of our mentors, who has been our mentor since day one, actually, through this program and until now. And he was extremely helpful along the way and prevented us from making a lot of mistakes. And then obviously he also introduced us to then our future investor, who became a good mentor, and also from that moment actually, and through him, we also were able to grow our network a lot. That was super helpful then in the future.
Very good example, very good journey. Philip?
Yeah, of course, there's tons of people that helped us on the way, that's for sure. And actually, I have to say also, Climate-KIC was the first acceleration program. I mean, we did one before, but Climate-KIC was the first one where we actually received funding as well. So that was really our starting point to get going, and to look more professionally into this, to actually quit our jobs and start working on this. So this was really a key point. And of course, the first business angels that believed in us when we literally had nothing, then an idea. That's worth mentioning. But also, what is really important, and what I try to really do a lot, is a peer network of other founders in the food industry that you can call and discuss problems. Also, at one point, actually, before applying to Climate-KIC Accelerator, I talked to Anastasia, asked her for tips, so thanks for that. So, you know, it's always paying forward. I think that's always cool.
I just wanted to ask that question. Do you talk to other entrepreneurs in the same industry or other industries out there? Like, do you talk to them? Do you ask them for advice? Do you give them advice? I mean, I just heard one good example. And Anastasia, do you teach more, maybe entrepreneurs even?
So we also started by when we worked in a co-working space at the beginning. We talked to other entrepreneurs, not necessarily in the same space, but in general, at the end, the structure of building a business is very similar, no matter what your product is usually, or at least the tips on how to grow your team and so on would be similar. So that helped a lot, this exchange initially. And then what we are now doing, there's in Switzerland kind of also coaching program, which is funded by the Swiss government. And so a co-founder, Naomi, and myself, we are also now kind of coaching there, like giving the entrepreneurial perspective to people that are planning to start a company or found a company, because we've just done it now in the past few years. And so for us, sometimes it was hard to get the information we needed. And so now we know what was this information, and maybe we can help others with it.
Very good to hear. And Philip, are you now giving back to other entrepreneurs, let's say, and help them in some way?
Of course, I think that's super important. And usually it's not a one-way story, right? You talk to others, and you actually get a lot of feedback and learnings while talking to each other. So that's, of course, super important. And I try to do it as often as possible.
Okay, very good. Audience, please remember to raise questions, be curious, and challenge my two interviewees here we have. I will ask one last question to each of them, and then we'll have time for some of your questions. Anastasia, let's start shooting out messages, especially before COP26, the United Nations Climate Conference is happening, just starting this Sunday. let's shoot our messages to our governments. What would you say to them, Anastasia?
It's a big one. I think food is quite high on the agenda now for COP26, but for us, it's really about making regulations at the end, because yes, you can make it voluntary, but then not everyone is participating. And at the end, what we've seen is usually with a regulation, the real change is happening. And so there must be, to a certain degree, some regulations in place to fix the food system. Not now speaking specifically about measuring it, but really also all the other aspects that are in the food supply chain that are currently maybe not going so well for the planet, put it like this.
Very good. Philip, let's tell to the corporates out there, what should be your message to them?
Yeah, I agree. We need regulations. We need a fair, level game. And so CO2 taxes, etc., are absolutely necessary to support a transition to a more sustainable food system. And we need also more transparency. So that's for consumers a very big task to look into the supply chains, and it's definitely not working well at the moment, and it's very hard for consumers to actually know what they're buying, and that must be changed, definitely.
Okay, what would be your message to investors or even banks out there? Anastasia first, and then we'll ask Philip.
To investors and banks. Well, invest in us. That would be my answer. Very straightforward. No, but I think banks, and I can only speak about now Swiss banks because that's where we're based and that's the banks I know, but they are actually opening more and more up. Like what we've noticed, they have now often a venture arm. These traditionally banks wouldn't invest in startups. It's a bit too risky, but now we see that they're doing more and more in that area to also foster innovation, and that I think is a cool development, that they have somewhere area or space to explore and foster innovation. And for investors, more and more impact investing is on the rise. If you look at these numbers, they're
We lost Anastasia. Philip, go ahead. What would be your message to investors and banks out there?
See that it's clearly something important.
Anastasia, we just lost you for a second. We'll continue with Philip.
Yeah, basically, so my message would be we also need to look at the analog world. Of course, we see a lot of investments in digital business models, which is super necessary, but let's don't forget about the analog world, because this is where a lot of the difference actually happens. And we need more resources go towards this, and this is super important.
Anastasia, your last words were opening up. What else did you want to say?
I don't know where you lost me, to be honest.
Talking about the Swiss banks.
No, just that they're opening up these venture arms or venture investment vehicles to foster innovation, but I don't know exactly where you lost me. So.
I mean, that's already a good message, and they need more. That's what you want to say, basically, right? And they need to be more
exactly
more investing. Okay, very good. What's the last one? What would be your advice to climate entrepreneurs out there? Give them one advice, each of them. Anastasia, then Philip, and then we'll switch to the questions the audience has.
Validate your idea first, and be very critical with yourself, because you always think it's a great idea, but maybe really listen and ask the right questions to hear what others say about it, and if someone would actually be willing to pay money for it. That I think is at the end the biggest challenge you need to unlock, because if no one would, if you give them a free product, they probably take it, but if you ask them for money, then you get the real answer, whether your product could survive on the market or not.
Philip.
That is already a very, very good advice. Let me maybe just add very generic, go for a very big problem. Then this validation will probably be good, because the bigger the problem, the higher the impact. Many people tend to work on rather smallish problems that they probably have themselves or see somewhere that are just not big enough to build a big company also. And yeah, so focus on the big problems first.
Okay, very good. Let me check out some of the questions. Give me a few seconds and then I'll come back to you. Just a moment. Okay, here I am back. We've got at least 3 questions coming up. The first one for Anastasia. How is it to be a female entrepreneur in the hospitality and food sector?
Good question, because I wouldn't know how it is to be a male entrepreneur in this sector. And so it's always a hard question to answer. But for us, we saw some positives because we never had to queue at any startup events for the toilet. So that was always very positive to be less female entrepreneurs. We see it's changing a bit, specifically in the hospitality industry. I mean, it is an industry that is not so male dominant. Like if you think about construction, for example, would be different. And there are quite a lot of females in general in this industry. In the kitchen, a bit less, however. So we see when we talk to customers, sometimes there's this old school mindset a bit where they're like, oh, a woman in my kitchen and that. But like that is just, I think, also something that is changing hopefully sooner or later. But it's quite a broad question. I don't know if I answered it now or I answered it quite vaguely, I would say. But if you have a more specific question, then feel free to ask.
Yeah, we'll have a next one. I think that's a good answer already. We'll have a next one. And that Philip starts first. How do you collaborate with other startup solutions in the same sector?
Right now, not too much. I mean, we're trying. For example, there is an app in Vienna called Inoco, where you can basically check any FMCG product, whether it complies with your personal values that you put behind. So that's a fellow entrepreneur from Vienna who works on this, and of course we work a lot with them. We're also working with a startup called Glacier that are trying to help companies find climate positive solutions. So there are collaborations every now and then, but yeah, of course, we're also quite busy on the core product, so that's always a challenge.
Sure. Totally understandable. And you, Anastasia, how do you collaborate with others?
For us, it was really initially when we did all these acceleration programs, different ones as well. So Climate-KIC was cool because there we had the impact entrepreneurs and everyone was somehow doing something in that area. Then we did a different one that was more that had like verticals, and one was a food vertical in Switzerland. And so there you met all the other food startups and could kind of have these discussions. And what we have now is a Slack channel as well, although it's been a bit less active now since COVID, but we have a Slack channel from just because you always meet the same people at these networking events. Then at some point, especially in Switzerland, it's a small country. And so then we created a Slack channel with some of them just to kind of keep each other posted on job openings or other things.
Very good. Good to hear. Last question to each of you. Anastasia first. Where do you see the biggest opportunities and trends in the food sector in terms of innovation and new technologies?
I think it's a great question. Right now, there's really a big hype around these alternative proteins. Also, when we talk to investors, a lot of impact investors or impact investors that focus also on food and food tech and agri tech, they say that alternative protein is one of the biggest trends right now. So I would also just agree with that. And then of course technologies. I mean, we're using AI technology, which has a big growth in the sense that you can also use it in different areas. So it's not specifically for the food industry, right? Because we're using it now for this application, but you could also use it for others. other applications and other solutions.
Very good, thanks. And Philip, what do you think? Which ones are new innovations and technologies in the sector?
I would probably focus a little bit more on the topic of consumer behavior and transparency, because as consumers now ask more for transparency and they ask proactively for climate positive solutions, that will probably have a big impact and will induce a big shift in how companies look at their products, at the marketing, but hopefully also on supply chains and how products are actually produced, and that a whole ecosystem of technologies around CO2 accounting, around transparency in supply chains, etc., will come to life and will be super important for consumers to do their actual choice and to really change the flow of money towards sustainable products.
Okay, very good. I have one more personal question coming from Christian directly. What would be your most important market geographically in the world to really go to and be active in? And it could be anywhere in the world. Where would it be? I mean, of course, there are some places in Europe, but where would it be? Anastasia, maybe first.
So excluding Europe, you're saying?
You may mention some in Europe, but I mean, even outside. I mean, do you see any markets outside there as well?
Yeah. Yes, we see actually a lot of potential. Definitely the United States. It's a massive market, very interesting. They have a lot of food waste. So United States would probably be the answer or the logical conclusion. But then actually Southeast Asia and Singapore and this area, they are a bit more fragmented, different countries and smaller, but they are more on the side of regulations in China even. So they're looking really more into how they can regulate food waste. And China has a law on where you get punished as a restaurant if you waste food now. So they are probably, to the nature of how their governments are structured, a bit more strict and can implement these regulations maybe faster than, let's say, in the States. But States would be a massive market, very interesting. So.
Okay, very good. And I didn't know that point about China. Very interesting, actually. Philip, what do you think?
Yeah, also USA probably, because they have the highest per capita meat consumption, and also a lot of their meat is actually from very bad conditions. So there will be a lot of work for us to do there.
Okay, very good, very good. All right, these were the questions. Thank you both. We've had Anastasia here leading KITRO. We've had Philip here leading Rebel Meat. Thanks for this interview. Thanks for talking about your journey and your future plans. Very, very curious. And please say goodbye to the audience.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Audience, please stay online. We will be having in just less than 17 minutes the next session on why startups should show their climate impact numbers clearly. We will be talking to Bram and Christine, who are experts in this space. Stay tuned. And now Christine will already explain you a bit more what we are doing in that sense. Stay tuned on this same YouTube channel. See you soon. Welcome to our week of action, today number 5. Today is about food, but also we will be talking a lot about climate impact. This week of action is organized by EIT Climate-KIC. EIT Climate-KIC has the big purpose to generate innovation and knowledge through our partners and communities all over the world and a lot in Europe. We do that with the main purpose to really create innovations and startups out there who can solve climate change and move ourselves towards a more climate positive world. That's what we're here for, and that's why we're doing this week of action. In the previous session, I did promise you a video. We didn't show it, but we'll show it right now, where Christine will talk a bit more about what we're doing in that sense.
I'm Christine Rohrer. I've been working with Climate-KIC for the last 3 years, and currently I work in the entrepreneurship team. And my work focus is mainly on climate impact. So climate mitigation means that we reduce the harmful emission of greenhouse gases, including CO2, and thereby contribute to stopping the global warming. So our program helps startups to understand how their product or service can address climate change and can mitigate climate change. And so it can be a very useful tool for a startup to progress in its growth.
You just saw a bit about what we are going to talk about in our panel right now. I'm Christian Daube. I'm leading the ClimAccelerator efforts to grow and help more and more organizers and partners across the world to start doing such climate accelerators, to help innovation scale into the market and even scale internationally to achieve as much as possible of climate impact we can with their products and services. Audience, remember, today is our day of food. Are you working on innovations or ideas? Please make them visible through our hashtag Destination 1.5. Again, we've got the hashtag Destination 1.5, where you can start making visible all of your innovations and ideas, even if you wanted, you work on. Show us a photo, show us an image, or even a small video about that. And please remember, audience, stay curious and ask my panelists many, many questions, and also challenge them a bit. We want to solve and all of your questions at the end of the session, basically. So let's come to the panel. I do believe I have my panelists, Christina and Bram, with me right now. Let's check it out. How are you doing? Welcome.
Hi.
Very good. Thanks for having you. And I will start to ask always Christina first, ladies first, to introduce herself and a bit more what we're doing in that sense. And then Bram, you may go ahead. And then I will have many more questions about the topic of why startups of the future should really show their climate impact numbers. Christine, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good afternoon. I think the video has already introduced me, so I just want to say hi, and I'm really happy to be here with you this afternoon.
Bram, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to meet you here. I'm Bram van der Grinten, design engineer specialized in sustainability and founder of Impact Forecast, helping Climate-KIC startups assess their climate impact.
Good. Thanks both to you to be here, and I would like to shoot some questions to Bram, especially about what climate impact forecast is and what this whole world about. Maybe Bram, tell us a bit more about it first.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Impact Forecast, what we do is help sustainable startups to know, grow, and show their climate impact. So to unpack that, first, it's not as straightforward as you might think to know your climate impact. So it takes a bit of a calculation and data, and we have an online tool and workshops to help impact entrepreneurs learn how to measure their startup's impact. And that's the know aspect. Next comes to grow, because it creates a compass for a startup to improve the impact over time. As they're developing the solution, they can take these impact science insights into the development. And it's important to show this data. So the way that we work makes the data transparent and also digestible for example, an investor audience or customers.
But I think we have to talk about this a bit more. I've seen many entrepreneurs out there in very diverse countries. None of them have ever shown me their climate impact. I was an entrepreneur myself in the Philippines, where we brought light to communities which never had light. We saw ourselves as a social business, let's say, but we never thought about our climate impact. So why should we do this, and why should we actually put effort in calculating it?
It is important because you might not be guaranteed a positive impact. So when it comes to this social dimension, if you're helping kids to study at night, I'm not questioning if that has a positive impact. But when it comes to climate change, things are not always as transparent. And it's possible to create a solution that has maybe more negative impact than positive change. And since today is all about food, an example of that could be an insect burger, and there's many different insects and many different ways of growing insects. Not all of them are more carbon efficient than, for example, the beef that they are aiming to replace. Even with vegetables, so we saw Rebel Meat is replacing part of the meat with vegetables, and they are making deliberate choices there to prevent choosing vegetables that, well, there's no vegetable that has a higher impact than beef, but there are vegetables that have higher impacts than some other meats. So therefore these things are non-obvious and need to be researched if the mission of the company is to make a positive impact.
And what are you looking for in that impact claim? I mean, what's the detail about this?
In our impact claims, we look for transparency and not necessarily for completeness, because I think what is holding back a lot of companies to come up with an impact claim is the idea that it will take a lot of research, or that there are so many unknowns, and there are a few unknowns, and that's why there's usually a workshop needed to help teams get started with this. But once you get the hang of it, it's generally quite easy and can really help you build a better value proposition, a better impact case. In some cases, it's really tied to the mission of the company, so of existential importance, but more and more it's becoming important to show your numbers to investors, to convince them that you're worthy of their investment in the sense of impact investing.
I think that's also a very important reason, showing this to stakeholders, showing this to investors. Christine, I would like to ask you, why are we working on this in EIT Climate-KIC? Tell us a bit more.
So we are focusing on climate impact in Climate-KIC because obviously we are supporting entrepreneurs with public taxpayers' money. So we are supported by the European Institute of Technology, by the European Innovation Council and other funders, but mostly this is public money. So if the European public spends money through us for us to help the world to address climate change, we have to make sure that each and every activity, that each and every startup we support truly achieves a climate impact, be it climate mitigation or be it climate adaptation. We actually support both. But this session is more about, or this session is exclusively about climate mitigation and the impact forecast tool.
Yeah, and I think that's really the motivation we have behind. And let's start digging into some of the examples. Bram, you just mentioned an example. Do you have some more examples maybe for us so that the broad audience can really get the grasp of it? Give us some more examples of very different industries and sectors.
Well, I would like to go with one example that you also just interviewed, because I was watching that interview and I learned for the first time about KITRO. I have seen a similar startup before called Orbisk, and they both use electronics to prevent food waste, which is a really interesting problem, because what is the amount of food of which you need to prevent the waste that is enough to offset the emissions that are actually quite high for electronics? So it takes, you almost have to emit CO2 into the atmosphere in order to build the device. So you have to ask yourself, how much kilograms of waste do we have to prevent before it pays off, and how does that reflect on the lifetime? So that is an interesting example, which for the cases that I looked into pans out to be very in the clear. So it's actually very easy to build a computer or to have enough components or let's say budget of impact to build the computer to sort out the food waste.
Okay, very good. And maybe Christine, do you have some examples in mind, or on what kind of examples are you working on currently or planning to work on?
So we work with startups of sectors, and I have recently participated in selection processes for our Clean Cities ClimAccelerator startup program. So, for example, we are supporting startups that help. There are various startups in the mobility sector, several of them offering combination of bike and e-bike cargo solutions for different places across Europe. So trying to motivate the end user to use the bike for the last mile transport home. So for example, there is a Dutch company that has also got engagement from the city where they operate, where the city offers to subsidize the cost of the cargo bike in poorer neighborhoods, which I find very interesting. There are also interesting solutions I've seen in the for urban green spaces. So, for example, usually the watering of urban parks there are timers that are used to start and stop the watering of urban parks. However, these timers, they have no intelligence. They don't know whether it has already rained, how humid the soil is, and so basically they start and irrigate every day at the same time. There is one startup that developed an interesting solution that takes the climate of the day, that takes the water situation of the city, plus the water needs of the plants into account, and then irrigates accordingly. Yeah, I think I stop here with these few examples.
But these are very good examples, and we can start to get the grasp really on why in climate impact numbers are important. And Bram, I'm sure you have seen quite a lot of calculations and forecasts. Tell us a bit first on how does it work in detail. Let's say, take us a bit through some of these steps.
Yes, let's say the steps are let me get an example out of the back of my head, because when you look at these examples across sectors, I think, and if you look at so many of these examples, you get the sense that some gains are bigger than others. So not only is it worthwhile to measure your impact to know if you're on the positive or the negative side, but we see that companies can differ on the positive side by orders of magnitude. And for example, in the food industry in general, and in transport and in the energy sector, there are like amazingly impactful startups that need to be discovered, and that also discover this through doing their own numbers. That, for example, in the energy domain, artificial intelligence can create slight optimizations, which at first on paper don't seem to add up too much, but because they're acting on such an impactful part of our society and can be broadly implemented, the impact there is actually huge. So how do companies found this out, right? What are the steps involved in getting to these final numbers? The tool takes a 5-step approach that we use, and it's based on life cycle assessment. So it's basically a quick scan life cycle assessment strategy where you look at all the phases of the product life cycle, so upstream and downstream processes and the use phase, and you add up all the life cycle impacts for all the resources that you need. So that actually requires a very deep understanding of all the materials that you need, the amount of energy that your process is using, the distances in travel, and so on. That is too complicated for most startups. So that is why the impact forecast tool focuses on key differences, and we help startups identify which those are. They are the key differences between your new system, for example, the Rebel Meat Burger, and the old system, the Pure Meat Burger, we could say. So for those key differences, we measure the environmental impacts for each difference, and that adds up to a total climate impact. The overall result is just a one-pager with all of the assumptions, the numbers going in, transparently declared, and also how the total climate impact is built up. And then that's where the interesting part is for the startups, is that usually you see that 1 or 2 differences out of maybe a dozen key differences are really driving the impact. And sometimes those are unexpected differences. So it pays off for the company to do this and to discover what is really driving their positive impact, what is holding back their positive impact, and to adjust their innovation and business model accordingly.
Very good, very good. I think that's a clear way, and I can think that through my previous business in the Philippines. I mean, we were just sending out these products to different houses and remote areas of the country, but there are many, many steps before that. Even when the product is produced and shipped to us in the Philippines, and when we distribute it, I mean, there are a lot of steps of that life cycle, as you say, we need to consider, right? And then obviously what happens afterwards when the clients are using it, etc. So very good also for me to understand this. Let's ask Christine a bit more, and then we will deep dive into some of these examples and differences maybe. Christine, how can we really make sure that more and more entrepreneurs out there use this? What could we do about this?
So I think the times are changing. We have seen young people take to the streets, and I think this is a movement that has started, which is not going to stop. So I think the time is right. What I also see is that there is growing interest, not only from environmental NGOs, but from the broader business sector in that field. And it's slowly by slowly, the society or different parts of the society are getting the message in the mainstream media that things are not right. So, for example, in Austria, an environmental NGO has examined 11 financial institutions as to whether and how serious they are about investing or not investing in fossil fuels. Even so, they all claimed to do sustainable investment, but 10 out of 11 didn't have credible policies behind. And this, for me, yes, this is the fact that was discovered, but the most interesting thing is that I hear this in the mainstream 5-minute news. So so this is what gives me hope and tells me the time is changing. And going forward, I think more and more, especially young people, will ask for the truth. I think people are tired of being lied at. So that's my hope.
And I do hope so as well. Bram, what do you think? How can we really help more and more and motivate more and more entrepreneurs and people out there to really start thinking and calculating their climate impact numbers?
Well, we could, for example, have a climate week of action leading up to the COP, but I think you're already in the process of that. This event is doing some good work spreading this inspiration. Sign up for Climate-KIC, sign up for Impact Forecast. Those are ways of getting busy with entrepreneurship. If you're listening and are motivated, I think I also agree with Christine, the market is heading this way. We need to, because we're on the verge of an existential crisis. It's really serious, the need for innovation in some fields. And there is so much possibility. Sometimes I'm disappointed by watching the discourse and, let's say, the political decisions around climate. They seem to be so unaware of the innovative capacity of young and also older companies, the new solutions that are on the horizon that need to be funded for positive impact. And indeed, as Christine also recognizes, I see a lot of cases where impact funding is rewarded without impact metrics involved. So if there's any measurement of the impact, it's on the, let's say, on the initiative of the entrepreneurs involved. It's not demanded from the funder side in the majority of cases. And we are working to better that situation. I think a lot of times the reason is it's believed to be too complex to ask for impact data in the early stage. And that is simply untrue. There's more and more evidence of that, and also more and more, let's say, investors, for example, Climate-KIC, but also Planet A, a venture capital firm that invests when they see a positive impact. It is becoming more commonplace, but it is unfortunately still the exception.
And I just wanted to ask this, I mean, what should we tell investors out there, whether it's funds, whether it's banks, what should we tell them out there to really start thinking more and more about this? What do you think? I mean, Christine, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that they have to be serious about where they put their money. So it's not it's if something looks green outside, it also needs to be green inside. And so I think investors have in the past sometimes or often not made the effort to look deeply. And I think by organizations like us in collaboration with Impact Forecast, making the climate impact accessible, visible, understandable, we are actually helping investors to take the right decisions. So by the more startups, the more companies have honest reports and true numbers that can be communicated, especially if we also get these climate impact forecasts validated, they have credibility. So these startups can say, okay, green outside, but also green inside. Our climate impact is validated.
Bram, do you want to add anything, or do you disagree? Agree?
I agree. The advice to investors is, I would say, threefold, three components. First, ask. That is already skipped too often. So simply ask, what is the climate impact, or if you're looking for biodiversity impact or social impact, ask explicitly, what is the impact that you're promising to make in measurable terms that we can later on, when the project has been funded and has been carried out, can actually check in the field if you are meeting those promises. So step one is to ask. And step two is to provide a way for the teams to answer such that you can compare the answers, because usually the use case of this is to decide where to invest. So you have to have comparable answers come back, and that requires usually formalization of the way that answers are provided. And that means developing impact tools, which is something that we support Climate-KIC in doing, making well-adjusted impact tools at different decision points. And the third part is, again, to ask, because we see in practice that it's sometimes promised at the start that there's an impact to be made. And I would say these are the best practice examples for green European funding and so on. There is actually this question, what is the impact that you're going to make? But there's not a follow-up throughout the program or throughout the release of funds or at the end of the funding period, where you ask again, with those same metrics, can you prove that you have made the impact that you set out to make? So it's very important to close that loop and to make sure these promises are also met. And where we do not meet the goals of impact projects, we then also have the opportunity to learn, to figure out what is changing the impact over time here as we're developing, which influences or which technology types do we need to pay extra attention to as they develop.
Very good points, and I think I agree to both of you. Very good points you're lightening up here. What should we tell to all these mentors and experts out there? I mean, we're working with lots of mentors who help these startups and entrepreneurs every single day. What should we tell them? Like, how can we motivate them to do more even? Christine, maybe first, and then Bram again.
I would tell them, guys, you can do this. It is not so complex. It is not too complex, and others have done it. And you do a one-day workshop and you have much better understanding and you have your first impact forecast, and then you can take it from there. So just try it, do it, be curious, and then work on it.
I know you've trained quite a lot of trainers and experts in that sense. What would you tell them, and how can you work with more?
Yeah, so I would say there are two levels of involvement. If you're coaching teams from a non-impact expertise side, so you're coming in from, let's say, a business acumen or having a startup experience and coaching them that way, then it's still like within your scope to ask for impact data, and you should expect impact data to be understandable to you. So it doesn't take a degree to understand a proper impact assessment. It will be clear to you how the startup makes impact. So ask for that even if you're not an expert in the coaching position. And indeed, I train impact experts who already know the entire story of life cycle, how to perform these really precise analyses, and I train them how to teach the essential parts of that methodology to startups. And there I would say the message is to keep it simple, to how to look for these key differences, and also how to discover that it's often a few parts in the business that are controlling most of its impact. And that discovery is what we help startups make.
I think so as well. Totally agree. Very good points. Looking, for example, at the entrepreneurship programs, there are incubators out there, accelerators out there. They say nowadays that there are more than 10,000, I believe, accelerators out there all over the world. Incubators, and maybe even more, 20, 50,000 incubators all over the world. How many of them are focused on green or climate topics? Very few of them. So how do you think we can motivate these guys to really start becoming greener and more climate oriented, and also ask for this from their entrepreneurs and mentors? What do you think, Christine?
Bram, help me, please. I don't have an immediate answer.
Yeah, so to incubators, how they should affiliate with green, well, how to motivate them, I would say personally, when I became a designer, I became aware that everything we design and produce has environmental impacts. And at first that felt a bit doom and gloom, like a problem I didn't want to be involved with, especially when I learned life cycle assessment, because then you learn to calculate what the damage is that you're doing while you're trying to make a better product for people. And that changed around when I learned about this concept of positive impact, that you can also innovate purposefully to change these parameters and to make society a lot better. And we need to do that. I would say if you're investing in a business that is not doing that, that is not investing in sustainable technology, it is investing in unsustainable technology. So think about that. You're putting long-term financial gains on something which is unsustainable, and that is not just a scientific term to say it's against the principles of nature or bad for the polar bears. It means the business cannot in the long term sustain, because it will infringe with our quality of life in a way that consumers will not buy, that grant schemes will not support. That will ultimately perish. So I think a spot of sustainability is necessary in any investment, and it doesn't matter the degree at which you do this, it's always worthwhile. So even a little bit is worthwhile in any fund.
I would agree. Christine, do you want to add anything?
Yes, so what I wanted to add actually to the conversation from before about working with the entrepreneurs and working with the tool, I think what is very important for me is that the entrepreneurs we work with learn to spell out their assumptions. And so there are two parts to using the impact forecast tool. One is the unit, the functional unit you compare to the baseline. And so here it's a technical matter that you actually calculate, you compare the key aspects of your solution, be it a service or a product, with the key aspects of the previous or the baseline solution or service which your new solution replaces. This is one part of the game. But when it comes to market entrance and how many units of your product are you going to sell, this is another dimension. And then it is very important that this is spelled out and this is communicated transparently, because this is where the margin of error can, I would say, be even bigger than at the at the level of the functional unit, because here we at the level of the functional unit we can rely on life cycle assessment data and databases and methods, and we have a tool and we can do close to accurate calculations. But when it comes to the startups themselves estimating their market entry and market penetration, this is where the calculations can become risky. And I would like to share one example. So we hadn't set, we had in our innovation portfolio, we asked innovation project proponents to tell us, to give us a climate impact estimate and also tell us their assumptions. And if I had only looked at the number, I would have been really misguided by favoring or by labeling or going for the highest number of that portfolio. But when I looked at the project proponent that had the highest number, their assumption, first of all, the timeline. They calculated what they would have achieved 30 years down the line. And their assumption was that 30 years down the line, 80% of the inhabitants of Europe will have adopted their solution. And then I could look back at the number and say, yes, this is a good hope, but probably we have to read this number with a lot of caution, because how realistic is it that you reach 80% of the inhabitants of entire Europe? And this just to illustrate the margins of error and the dimensions they can have.
And let's continue with that example, or this story about how optimistic or pessimistic they could be. Bram, what examples did you see? I mean, are they usually very optimistic, very pessimistic? I mean, what kind of examples and assumptions do you see?
To know about the optimism or pessimism, we would have to research the same projects at the early stage and then at the later stage. And there's very few opportunities to do that. But actually, the evidence that is there suggests that impacts get better over time with these impact assessments, or with impactful companies. I would say that it is very easy to make mistakes, and sometimes a 1000x mistake, a 1000-fold mistake, because we're dealing with climate impact and CO2 equivalents. And when it comes to euros or kilometers, we have a sort of intuition of the numbers that would be normal. And in this case, we really do not. And that leads to, for example, during a validation just this week, we discovered a 1000x problem, a mistake. So that's a way, it's actually, the problem was in an energy equation. So after calculating some energy units, there was a 1000 times magnitude error. And normally that would strike you as a very, large bloated number. In this case, we weren't so sure. So we had to really recalculate and discover that. So there is a validation process where we take these errors out. It's easy to make them. That shouldn't stop you from trying. So even a forecast or any environmental assessment that has grave mistakes or optimism bias in there can still teach the entrepreneur a lot about what they need to take care of. Of course, you find sometimes that companies indeed say they will conquer 80 or 100% of the market. And that's often not realistic, although sometimes it is. So there are cases where there's, for example, a B2B product delivered to a market with just very few customers that are completely dominating the market with just 3 players. If you sell the solution to all of them, you actually have 100% coverage. So there's these, or 80 or 90. So sometimes optimism is realistic, and in order to prevent the, let's say, entrepreneurial optimism, there are checks and balances to have your forecast checked by external experts.
Okay, very good to hear. Audience, please remember to raise questions to Christine and Bram. I will have 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll have time to answer them. Christine and Bram, my simple question would be, in which industry or sector could we achieve the highest climate impact? Where should I start as an entrepreneur? Christine, maybe go first. What do you think?
I think we can achieve the highest impact when focusing on daily routines of us as human beings. Because any daily routine will be repeated thousands of times through our lifetime. So even tiny changes in these routines can make a big difference if they have a large adoption.
Very good point. Bram, what do you think, and what have you seen there?
I'm thinking about the pie chart of global emissions and the fact that there's a few big areas on there, 2 of which strike me as most important. One is the energy domain, because we can talk about recycling and meat and transport, but the problem is that all of these things are emitting CO2 because we use fossil fuels for everything, right? And you can take away that fossil component out of most industries, and you will get that change if you focus on the energy industry. So that is still the most worthwhile thing. Climate change is not driven by you taking the car. It's driven by the infrastructure that enables you to take the car much more readily and easily than, for example, the train, and a system which makes the car more affordable if it runs on petrol, in some circumstances more affordable to the end user. So the energy domain. And the other one is agriculture. you're focusing on food today, so it's topical, but I see a very big opportunity in agriculture because it's an industry where, if you think about it, we're doing carbon sequestration. Food products are CO2 absorbed by the air, and what we need to do is to get the balance right. So right now, again, fossil fuel is driving all of it, and we're even creating fertilizer out of damn fossil fuels, while we also have a manure problem. So if we create a circular agriculture, not only can we drastically reduce the impact of all kinds of foods and do away with this, let's say, guilting of the individual shopper, but there is this potential to even flip the balance, I would think, to make agriculture a net carbon sink, which is futuristic at the moment, but is very promising because on that big pie chart, we only currently have one carbon sink, and it's forestry. So if we could have two of those, that would really help us solve our climate issues.
Very good arguments and very good examples. I think both of you are right in that sense, and I would guess so as well. Please give me a few seconds, a few minutes. I will check out the questions from the audience, sort them a bit, and then I will ask these questions to you both directly. Just give me a second. Okay, here I'm back. We've got one big question at least coming up, and I can see a few more coming up, and I have a few more. First of all, and maybe Christine starts first, and then Bram next. How can you take part in the impact assessment as a startup? Christine, go first.
So all startups that join our accelerator programs have the opportunity to participate in the climate impact forecast workshop. So please go to our website, check out entrepreneurship, and look at open calls for startups. Currently, there is one open call, which is which supports startups that meet the criteria or work along the concepts of the new European Bauhaus. Those are sustainability plus. So it's sustainability in terms of the environmental sustainability, but also quality of experience, including aesthetics, and inclusiveness, which include accessibility and affordability. So we are looking for startups who align or work in alignment with the principles of the new European Bauhaus. The call is a joint call. It's 4 KICs have opened this call: KIC Digital, KIC Food, KIC Energy, and Climate-KIC, and we have it on our website.
Thanks, Christine. And Bram, what would you say?
I agree with Christine. The largest EU initiative on climate innovation is Climate-KIC, so that's where you would go and also meet Impact Forecast. If you're not selected for one of these programs, you're still welcome on our platform. So impact-forecast.com is where you can sign yourself up. There's a free level where you can engage with examples and see if this is interesting for you. And we make both the tool and the support as affordable as we can to startups and innovators. So that's a place where you can start making self-assessment more or less for free and ask for support when and where you need it.
Very good, thanks. Next question coming up. And Bram, maybe first, then Christine. Do you think we will ever reach a standard in measuring climate impact?
Oh, it's me first. I don't think so. You would hope that there would be one way to measure the climate impact of all systems, but that would be having exact measurements of the system, which is simply not economically feasible. It's more expensive than the thing that you're actually measuring. So that's not an option. Therefore, we need to have tools customized for industries that are easy to use, but still very close to the truth. So you would have, for example, your carbon calculator for your airplane trips and office expenses. Those are already well known, and we need to get those tools for every sector. And actually, I see them appearing. So that's what's popping up. Life cycle assessment and impact data is being fed into decisions. Just there is still the majority of decisions where this needs to happen, but the ways are there, and we see this trend.
So when it comes to climate impact, precision is actually irrelevant. We need to get the how would I say, the category right. We need to know whether we are talking about millions of tons or whether we are talking about kilograms. And the moment somebody gives me a precise amount with some digit behind the comma of their climate impact, I can't believe it. It's actually not an indication of correctness. Because if you are estimating something, you really can't estimate the third point behind the comma.
Okay, very good. One personal question from me coming in. What was the startup or example you have seen with the highest climate impact where you could also like trust the assumptions? Bram, maybe what examples have you seen out there?
Yeah, my mind jumps to Hydrogrid, which is a company that we also used for some example materials after validating their forecast and really double checking what they were doing. The model that they have is to work within hydropower stations to increase the deployment opportunity, which takes in a lot of knowledge about the electricity infrastructure and, let's say, predictions, weather predictions for renewables, but also energy predictions for fossil installations. A lot of numbers that aren't usually crunched, especially not at hydropower plants. And if you do in Norway or Switzerland or other places where hydropower is available, the little bit that you can displace electricity in that grid has an enormous impact. And this is the kind of, I was talking earlier about B2B solutions that have just very few customers that you need to talk to, and none of them lose out if other ones also buy it. So they could in principle all get it. And that's the case with this. So with one customer at a time, they would immediately have a very big impact because one customer controls many power plants.
Very good example. And then let's start wrapping up the session. Please, Christine and Bram, what kind of message should we give out to the United Nations Conference on Climate Change called COP26 in Glasgow? What message should we give them? Christine first and then Bram.
We need to get to 1.5.
Very good. Bram.
So,
I agree. 2.6 is dangerous. Anything above 1.5 is dangerous. It is not that we are trying to see how much we're going to turn up the radiator to make it comfortable. The problem is that past 2 degrees, our understanding of the physics of our climate breaks down. And we do not know if there will be a survivable future after a higher than 2 degree climate change. So let's keep it to 1.5.
Very good, very good. Christine, I don't know if I cut you off or if you wanted to say more. I thought like I cut you off.
No, it was me, short and sweet.
Very good. So, audience, thanks to Christine Röhrer, Climate Impact Manager at ERT Climate-KIC, and Bram van der Grinten, co-founder and leader of Climate Impact Forecast. Thanks to you both for this session. This will be useful, I hope, for the audience and entrepreneurs. Say goodbye to them, please, to the audience. Thank you, audience, for listening in. Stay tuned. Right now, in parallel, we do have the Climate Launchpad Grand Finals happening, where startups are pitching, and they want to be the winners of the worldwide business competition, where more than 55 countries participated, and these 16 startups are pitching right now. Stay tuned on that YouTube link as well. Plus, at 2 p.m. right now, just in less than 15 minutes, we will be talking climate with Antonio Romero, and we'll have that session. And at 4 p.m., the last session of today is where we will be presenting what are we doing in our Young Innovators program, where we really enable young people to start thinking and solving climate issues out there. Thanks for the sessions. There will be more tomorrow and on Sunday, so please stay tuned and see you soon again. Thank you.